Alexander Ripley, known by our friends as Mary Ripley, being interviewed by John Milner on May the 17th, 1989 in Los Angeles. Mrs. Ripley has experienced 50-some years as a volunteer leader in local, national, and international programs. In her long career, she has been a major influence in the field of volunteerism. She has been a longtime friend and supporter of the University of Southern California School of Social Work and has served on the boards of numerous Los Angeles social agencies. Mary, you were active in the attempt to establish mental health services for the Asian community here in Los Angeles. This project failed. Could you tell me about this? I know that you've said that we can learn from our failures as well as our successes, and I'm sure this was a learning situation. A little bit, because part of it was...
Okay, we'll watch this wire. I was talking about the importance of developing community involvement in this hospital as it was expanding, and I was talking in terms of the enlarged numbers of Asians that are in the area where the hospital was serving. And this was, as I said, in the beginning parts, or not the beginning actually, but in the civil rights movement had been going, and it was the beginning of the Asians kind of recognizing that they needed to sense their power and kind of stretch their wings into getting their demands, and they were learning a lot from the black community and how the black community had used its influence and its sense of getting their voices heard. And we were very pleased about that, so we developed this community council. But it backfired because in order to meet their demands, they were not willing to do their part. They wanted us to do our part, and they were not willing to come halfway. And it was, for me, as chairing that community council, it was a tremendously learning experience because they marched on the hospital, they picketed us, they used all the techniques that had been developed during many of the years before. And it was a very frustrating period of time because although there were leading people in the Asian community, Dolores Wong and others, who were certainly positive and constructive, but they could not convince the people who were coming to the hospital demanding services. And we were limited in our ability to give services because of the restrictions by the government guidelines, plus the just the limitation of the available professional services and so on. It ended up as a very frustrating experience because in the end, nobody won. And the hospital was closed down, and as you know, Kaiser took over the building. So that the Asian community lost the opportunity to have a mental health service in their community, and we lost a wonderful service, and we, the hospital board, and some of us as volunteers lost a sense of how we could work with community people, and we had to go back to the drawing board and try to figure what we didn't do that would open up their willingness to communicate with us and their willingness to work with us. It was a very frustrating and a very depressing time. And, you know, it went on in other areas of concern, and things that have happened since have, I think, been very valuable for me to have had that experience. Because as a volunteer, you have to learn to not always have your own agenda. And, again, it comes back to the whole quality of needing to have understanding.
Yes.
And understanding of different cultures. And we didn't play our cards right in that situation. We tried to be open, but obviously we hadn't built the kind of bridges of understanding that I was talking about earlier.
Yes.
And so everybody lost. And there have been other situations when through people's demands and through situations that have been complicated because of the climate that we're living in nowadays, and because of the crisis that we're really in having people know what services are available and how we can help them. I don't know that I can add anything specific. I know there was one point that I was going to talk about in one of these areas, but in thinking back over that Rest Haven experience, I found that was really awfully frustrating as a volunteer because I couldn't change it.
Yes.
I couldn't, I couldn't make a difference. And that's one of the things that I think volunteers need, is a sense that they can make a difference. I don't know what that opens up in your thinking.
Yes, I think it's very important. I think the Asians are not used to most of the Western ways of organizing and conducting things. Their sense of authority and direction is somewhat different. And it's probably an educational thing over a long period of time to get them really involved. I think they make less use of social agencies than most groups. There's been an increase, of course, in the use of agencies with the Vietnamese and some of the other Asian groups coming here.
Yes, right. This whole experience in Rest Haven, as I said a moment ago, kind of prepared me for some of the things that we're going through now. And as you know, right now I'm working in Planned Parenthood, and we are constantly surrounded by now opposition. And I felt it was very valuable having had that experience when we've just gone through this Operation Rescue here, where we had people who felt very strongly about their side, and we felt very strongly about our side.
Yes.
And yet we have to live in peaceful coexistence in some way. And the numbers of volunteers that have been involved and have been willing, for instance, the march in Washington, that was an example of volunteers getting together as activists. And this is what I remember now I wanted to talk about, because more and more volunteers are finding that one of their important and exciting roles is being advocates. And most nonprofit private agencies now have public affairs committees, or government affairs committees, whatever you want to call them. And this is an opportunity to see how we as volunteers can be activists in changing legislation and in changing public opinion. And this is a whole new element in volunteerism. We didn't have this in the 50s. We were service volunteers or board volunteers.
Sure.
And one of the changes there that has been helpful in some ways, also it's held us back, is the federal government has passed legislation that limits the amount of, as you know, the amount of lobbying per se that private agencies under the tax-exempt 501c3 can do. However, we who feel strongly about issues, and the issues are changing and developing and becoming more focused, know that in order to deal with those issues, we are going to have to take stands. And so we're learning how to take those stands as volunteers. And we're learning how to speak with authority and with knowledge in Sacramento and in Washington. And it's an exciting new element. We started doing something like this in the Child Welfare League in the 60s, but now they have a Washington office. Most of our nonprofits have Washington offices now, and I will never ever forget going to this last affair in Washington with 600,000 people, volunteers, every one of them. And
600,000. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, it was just they tried to say there were only 300,000, but there were 600,000.
It's amazing.
It was it's the quality of concern that you're now seeing in China.
Yes.
The young people want to see something changed, and so the whole quality of participation or involvement has taken on a whole new tone now.
Mm-hmm.
And here I am at 74, when I probably ought to sit at home and knit or do something like that.
No.
And here I'm going to a march in Washington. My husband must have flipped off his cloud. But it's
I think you'll be marching when you're 90.
but it's a whole new door that's open for me now.
That's exciting.
And in some ways, I learned it in those early days at Rest Haven. They got, they came in and said, "This is what we want, and we want to be heard."
Sure.
Well, now we're learning that the issue, in my view, right now in this particular cause is freedom of choice. And the other thing that's fed into a lot of my thinking in my volunteer work has been the changing role of women. And
I was going to ask you that.
Yeah, I think that's been a terribly exciting, and that starts way back when I first got involved with the whole need of daycare. And I saw the most important thing that women needed now was to have somebody to take care of their children, so that they could either have a job or do something else that was important. I could never have done all the volunteer work I've done in my life if it hadn't been that I had a very supportive husband and help at home.
Yes.
And on the other hand, I continue to always felt, and I still do feel, that your family and your children are the most important. And they came first, and then what time was left over was for my own causes. But women are finding, the whole question about women working, we talked about that earlier, and people are saying, well, you can't have very many volunteers now because all these women are. Now, the Junior League, for instance, 95% of their membership are employed. So they obviously have night meetings. They've adjusted to that. But the fascinating thing, John, is that we're finding that a lot of these women who work 9 to 5 or 8 to 4 or whatever it is, many of them doing highly skilled technical work with computers and highly skilled jobs in offices, taking lots of responsibility, look forward to having evenings or weekends when they can do some people-oriented things.
Very interesting.
It's an interesting dichotomy to saying that they want to do something that shows that they care.
Yes.
They want to go and paint a hospital or a hospice or do things that really put them in touch with people. They want to tutor.
Yes.
Or help with literacy, or teach English, or a variety of kinds of jobs. And many of those women are also doing this kind of activist work that I'm talking about, and they do it in conjunction with their job. And they're able to express their opinions and show that they stand for certain specific causes. We started a new group out in Palos Verdes, which is traditionally an upper middle class community, bedroom community. Now it's becoming more and more a yuppie community. very rich, middle-class young people. And we started this organization out there about 3 weeks ago with asking people to come and join to be concerned with family planning. And we didn't think we'd get much of a reaction, and in Nothing Flat we had 100 members.
Is that
Each
right?
of them paying $50 or more to join, to be a part of a group that will simply be doing public relations and public information.
Marvelous.
And this just shows that there is a lot of concern and a lot of desire to be a part of where the action is. And that's what volunteerism is all about.
I think many people are never asked to serve.
That's right.
And I think there
That's
needs
right.
to be some aggression on the part of
Right.
recruitment and of volunteers.
Well, we have, the national organization called Volunteer,
Yes.
which has the network of volunteer centers all across the country. And then the independent sector that has done this report that they got Gallup to do a whole study on, and that the study is not just on volunteering, it's on giving and volunteering. And they have a whole national program showing that people who give also want to volunteer,
Yes.
and people who volunteer also want to give,
Yes.
and it follows. So that philanthropy is, all a part of the whole volunteer movement.
Oh, of course.
And unfortunately, fundraising is also a part of that. But one of the things that happened to me that also was a part of my volunteer experience that I think is probably typical. I was asked to take on Heart Sunday for the County of Los Angeles when they hadn't had a Heart Sunday, and this was an interesting assignment. And I was given a lot of staff help, but I was supposed to recruit people from all over the county to go and cover and ring doorbells, on Heart Sunday. Well, because of the fact it was certainly a very current concern, people were really concerned about heart disease, and it was becoming more and more recognized as the national killer. We were very successful, and so then obviously they asked me to do it again. And we moved on, and that's when I worked with Chauncey,
Yes,
Chauncey Alexander.
yes.
And we had a wonderful experience, but what happened to me was that they asked me to go out and raise all this money, and then they never gave me a chance to have any participation in how the money was spent. And so I raised the roof and said I didn't think that it was right to ask a volunteer to do all the work and not have some sense of helping to decide how the money was going to be spent. So then that moved them off the dime, and I was put on the board, and I was one of the first women on the board, and that again shows the changing role of women, getting their voices heard and not just being pushed off to the side. You go and raise your money and we'll tell you how to spend it. So the other thing, back on the changing role of women, and that is something that I'm especially interested in, and that's on the international level.
Yes.
And you and I have talked about this before. I've recently been in India, and I went primarily to study the changing role of women. And I wanted specifically to know how they were changing the role of widows and divorcees and so on, which, as you know, is very, very limiting in India. Once they become a widow or a divorcee, they're a no-class citizen.
Yes.
Well, there are women there now, wonderful women that I met, that I was so impressed with them, that are changing the laws so that the dowry and the whole problem of giving up, everything if they become a widow or a divorcee, that those laws are being changed, and it's being done by women, obviously. And so I see a tremendous opportunity through the volunteer movement and through through social work and through a caring society of seeing the role of women changing.
I think it's been dramatic last 10 years.
Right.
Dramatic changes.
And for a while it was we were our own worst enemies.
Yes.
Because we would come charging in and disrupting meetings, and I think now we've had to learn to get the trust of the male population of the world, and to know and their respect.
Yes.
And I think that there are people who have been tremendously influential in that kind of an area.
Mm-hmm.
And volunteerism has been always, I think, a part of it.
Very much so.
But we do have to be careful not to be our own worst enemies in that area.
Mm-hmm.
And it means we have to learn discipline. We have to be on time. We have to be considerate of agendas and learn to handle in a business-like way meetings. And it's been good training for all of us.
Yes. And it's good for the men.
Well, I hope so.
They learned something about working with women rather than just working for them.
That's right. And
it's made a great difference in the whole male behavior, I think.
Well, I would hope so. It would seem to me that women, because we are the child bearers and so on, we are perhaps the more caring of the two, but that doesn't mean that the men aren't caring also. And we simply have to change the male priorities.
They're being freed to care.
Yeah. You know, there's another area that I find tremendously challenging, and that is the whole area of the environment. Mm-hmm. And I've been watching these youth movements, China and Korea, and the students, and the things that are happening, even our dreadful gang activities here in this city and others. It seems to me that young people, well, we need a cause. We need something that pulls us together to work for. Mm-hmm. And we need a cause, and the cause, can be negative or it can be positive. And the gang causes, of course, are negative, and I think some of the student causes. But my feeling is that if we could make it terribly important to the young people to know and understand what's happening to the world, to the earth and the environment, that may become a cause that they will put their shoulders behind and work for, in the same way that they work for a war or that they work for a march. Or and I don't know, did you by any chance go to the program on Saturday?
No.
They had a program, I didn't either, but they had a program downtown by the Physicians for Social Responsibility. And that, again, is a volunteer group of physicians, who have tried to awaken us to the problems of nuclear proliferation and so on. Their emphasis is on the environment. And I heard Paul Ehrlich from Stanford speak not so long ago, and went to a session as a volunteer called Global Tomorrow. And they're going to have a large conference here in the fall, and I'm working on that as a volunteer. But it seems to me that's one of the things that we can recruit people around now and get some of the steam worked off.
No, I think there's an interest certainly in the educated young. I don't know how extensive the knowledge is.
That's right. It's hard. It's hard for me or any of us to understand the effect of the greening and the ozone layers and the things that Ehrlich was talking about. But just the same, if we know that there is a threat to something that really affects us, which is the sunshine and the beach and the water we drink and some of the simple things that maybe we can. Yeah.
Which
future.
I think many young people question they have any future.
Yeah, right. Well, it's a very, it's a very telling time
Very.
for all of us.
Very.
And it certainly behooves all of us to hold hands with the rest of the world and
I'll say.
learn our responsibilities together. And, but Lindemann, I think, said some really good things in that little squib.
I'll be interested in reading it.
And he has a fantasy that he has outlined here that I'll give you. That what would happen if there were no volunteers? And
very good.
it's one that several people over the years have explored, and I think that it's one thing to have a sense that if there were no volunteers, there would be a lot of things that would grind to a stop. But what we really need to think is how we can help caring people to help each other.
Yes.
And it isn't so important that we stress volunteering. It's important that we stress caring, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And seems to me that's the key to democracy. And that's the kind of thing that Lindemann was talking about.
You're a very far-sighted man.
Must have been.
Time I had him.
Yeah, it must have been.
That was in the 1940s.
Very articulate.
Yes, very.
I remember he came to one of our conferences at the National Assembly. And well, John, one of the questions I would ask you is, what are the brains in the field of social work going to do to help us with the things that we're talking about? You say the Council on Social Work Education is one place.
Yes, I think that's a focal point. But I think there needs to be consultation with deans, the various schools, about getting more on volunteerism in the curriculum. And some of them, I think, would be very favorable. Get started a few places. There was a course offered on volunteerism. I think it would be valuable. It's not an easy job for a dean to get a faculty to agree to that kind of thing. But it's certainly worth trying.
Well, I have been talking ever since I've been on the Board of Counselors, and evidently the keynote speaker at graduation at SC spoke on volunteerism.
Yes, that's what I understand.
And so I think there is movement.
Yes.
And if I could do anything before I'm not able to do anything, it would be my hope that we could make, if we didn't do anything else but make a model.
Yes.
In our school, SC is certainly a leader in curriculum changes and direction.
Yes, it has been.
And there are the trouble. For instance, I have spoken with Randy Anderson's classes down in Cal State Long Beach, but she's teaching in the Department of Recreation. I don't think that's where it should be. I think it should be in the School of Social Work.
Yes. It's because recreation's awfully specialized type of volunteering.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Yes.
Yeah, you have to have certain skills, and after all, if social work is the caring profession, volunteerism is based on caring.
Yes.
And if we want to complement each other in our fields of endeavor, we need to learn from each other.
My own experience is that so many social agencies are completely unimaginative about how to use volunteers, and I think social workers should be trained to use some imaginative, because an awful lot of volunteers offer to start, and then they're disillusioned what they're given to do.
That's right, exactly.
And they just leave because they're not satisfied, and they needs to be something gained out of the experience as well as something given.
Exactly. And nowadays, the volunteers that you're getting are highly skilled people,
right.
and they're not willing to just do make work, or maid work.
That's right.
They need, and as I said earlier, they need to feel that what they're doing has a purpose in the overall structure of the agency. Well, we've been doing a lot of work in helping that area from the National Center. And for instance, one of the programs we've had is using handicapped people as volunteers.
Yes.
And if we can, that again is developing a new resource. But it meant that we had to get the agencies that would be imaginative on how they would use a handicapped person as a volunteer. And we've got to help agencies to come up with those kinds of creative jobs.
I think a lot of agencies, shouldn't generalize that much, but I think some agencies now recognize they should use volunteers, but they really don't know how, or don't make an effort to make good use of them. But they're supposed to have them, so they have volunteer programs.
Yeah. Well, in my lifetime, we have moved from where the hospitals were the beginning and the first that had directors of volunteers to now most agencies have directors of volunteers. It may not be a full-time job, but it is a person who has that as a specific assignment.
Yes.
And in my view, that's a terribly exciting change and development. Because one of the things I had to convince Chauncey about when we were working on developing the volunteers in other than just fundraising, he had to be committed to it. The executives got to be committed to that concept, so that he or she will give some structure and some emphasis to and priority to staffing that kind of an office. Then you can't just plunk volunteers down in X room and expect them to perform. They've got to have supervision, and getting a volunteer program started, it doesn't save the agency money. That's a false concept.
And I think nationally that's been pretty much said.
Yeah.
I think Reagan always said we can save money by this kind of thing. It's a terrible mistake.
Well, it's absolutely ludicrous because you don't save money.
No.
And it's taken us in the volunteer movement a long time to convince professionals that they have to have supervision, and they have to take time, they have to do training, they have to do orientation.
Sure.
But they've got to recognize that the volunteer brings something special.
Right.
That's that extra special quality to a program. And in order to really understand that, we, the volunteer, have got to help in, whether it's in the schools of social work or through United Way, giving higher funding or whatever area. But there has to be a continuing source of information in that area. Well, I think we're on the right track, and I think that there are all kinds of tremendously exciting things happening. And as far as I'm concerned, volunteers are here to stay.
And you've had a long career in it, and you've really seen the development of volunteers.
Yeah, well, it has been an exciting 50 years.
Oh, absolutely. Just unbelievable.
But I've been very blessed, and I've been very blessed with the opportunities that have been given me, and as I said, to have a husband that supported me, which is terribly important, and to have someone with my children when they were little, and I've been fortunate to have the training of the Junior League, and I've been fortunate to have exposure to national organizations and international organizations, and to travel.
Yes.
And all of those things come together to make
Very rich life.
make it very exciting.
We're very fortunate to have had you.
Well, I'm lucky to live in this community. Have buddies like you, John. So,
Been just
it's
great. Appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate talking my ear off.
Oh, I'm delighted. Is there anything you'd like to add?
I don't think so. I think I've said more than I probably should say. As I said in the beginning, though, I wouldn't want this to be just a statement of Mary Ripley's life. It's the kind of things that I've been exposed to.
Yes. I have a statement of your life right here.
Right. Yeah. Well. That's certainly that part of it.
It's marvelous.
You know, someone has said that there were a couple of things. One, they quoted this wonderful statement of Confucius, that man wrapped up in self makes a small package.
That's a marvelous. I've never heard that one before.
I think that's good. And then the other one that I think, I don't know whether Lindemann said it or what, but someone also has said that what I am is God's gift to me, but what I become is my gift to God.
Very well said.
And I think that's what I always
Two
believe.
beautiful quotes. No, I believe
well,
very much.
That's,
I think we've gone through a period of person in a small package.
Yeah.
And we're kind of coming out of it with the youth groups.
Oh, I think so. I think so. We have to, because the future of the world lies in the hands of my grandson and my grandchild.
Oh, absolutely.
Children, and those are the ones that are going to make the difference.
Certainly will.
Well, we'll work together.
Right.
Right.